Thanks for listening today. I want to be transparent with you. Besides hosting this podcast, I also work for Everly Health, our sponsor for today's episode. However, all views and opinions expressed on the podcast are my own or those of my guests, not those of Everly Health. So welcome to Digital MD Podcast for Innovators, where we explore the future of healthcare, translational research, and the intersection of academia and industry. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Kuo, and today we have an incredible guest. This is Dr. Marc Succi. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And he's a radiologist, an innovator, and an entrepreneur whose groundbreaking work in medical device innovation and digital health and all of the different work that he's doing in academia has positioned him in the translational science area. He's founder and executive director of the MESH Incubator at Mass General Brigham, a first-of-its-kind division that transformed clinical needs to patentable and licensable innovation. With multiple published and pending patents, collaborations with Harvard, MIT, and the biotech industry, and founding 2-Minute Medicine, Dr. Succi is at the forefront of emerging medicine with technology and business strategy. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for having me.
Great. And so before we dive in, I just want to tell you about a exciting new 83 biomarker test we're launching at Everlywell. For less than $34 a month, Everlywell has a 360 measurement across 6 key health categories, including hormones, nutrition, and immunity. So if you can see your health from every angle every year, and with your results, you get clear personalized insights and recommended next steps from a clinician to help you take action. I'm excited to see this go even further and Everlywell 360 to take lab testing to make it easier and more accessible. So head to everlywell.com and check it out. All right. So, Dr. Succi, we are so excited to have you. I have so many questions I want to ask you about medicine and science. So today we'll cover a few things like intellectual property, commercialization, the evolving, landscape of radiology and AI and digital health, biotech and digital platforms, and sort of how you think about your career and the arc of your career and what this means for why you do what you do.
Awesome.
I'll start by saying, what inspired you to blend the different fields, your journey to lead the creation of MESH Incubator? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, early on in high school and university, I was in this program in university called Health Science avec Master, and it was totally problem-based. So no lectures, no biochem lectures, no chemistry lectures. All we did was like small group tutorials and solving problems. And through that, felt like I got a lot of experience in problem solving and really became to learn that the knowledge set, whether it's medicine, comp sci, something else is there. It's somewhat interchangeable, but the skill sets of solving problems across disciplines were really interesting to me. And so coming to med school with that viewpoint, wanted to be at a really good med school. So got into Harvard, definitely went, and it wasn't much of a choice. I was in Toronto at the time and they just didn't have anything like American schools. One key point is that, American schools, almost all of them encourage you to take either a 5th year or a year at some point to do an MBA, do research, do some sort of, year that really helped you become someone with more diverse skill set and a physician leader. And so I love that. Wasn't an option at the Canadian schools. And then coming here, it was just being in Boston. There were so many opportunities. Ended up going to MIT, working on some regenerative medicine, stem cell-based therapeutics, patented that. Company went public. So I had a lot of that experience. Started my own company during that year. This is around 2013. And then coming to residency, I had attendings asking me, people with labs for like 20, 30 years, full professors, how to start companies on their ideas. And my thought was, well, you've been here a lot longer. I just got here. Why are you asking me this? And it became really clear. We ended up doing surveys and a bunch of other stuff that the vast majority of the 8,000 faculty at Mass General Brigham were not armed with any sort of skills on innovation and commercialization, just did not know where to start. The knowledge set was really poor. And so armed with this data, ended up convincing some leadership, my chair at the time, and later our CIO, Chris Coburn, to give some funding to create the MESH Incubator, right? And so MESH is the first integrated incubator in a hospital. It's on the ground. It's like right? When you come out of the OR suite, there's the incubator with all sorts of tools and 3D printers and stuff to prototype new tools. And it was developed for a few different reasons. One, to provide fundamental education in innovation and commercialization. So med school at HMS, any med school doesn't have any requirement for innovation education, right? They have requirement for like pathophysiology, ethics, but there's no innovation. Residency doesn't have that requirement. No accrediting bodies require it. So we're going to provide that. And we've done that. That's what Mesh Core is, which is our yearly conference, as well as the curriculum that we have for all our faculty. And then
I wanted
also,
to
yeah,
mention just quickly, this is fascinating because I feel like you were in the right place at the right time. Not everyone is. And thinking through some of the work that you've already done with the right skill sets and uh, the confidence to basically create this. I will mention two things that I've been reading on. One is a book called actually The Algebra of Happiness by Scott Galloway. He talks about when you're young, it's to be in a place where but things are buzzing and things are happening. So I feel like Boston kind of set you up for this, right? Because you had the hospitals, you had the innovation, you started companies. How are you able to do that, even with mesh on top of it? Um, what is your core area? Because it sounds like you dabble in everything from commercialization to startups and are you still running those startups? And are you also an academic? And
yeah,
do you still see patients? And
yep.
how do you do all of that?
Yeah. So to answer the second part first, still have my startup, still run them, multiple inventions after that, that generally get licensed out. So you're not really involved in running those. I have my own lab, about 25 Harvard students,
Incredible.
put about 15 to 20 publications a year, mostly on AI and business and medicine now. And I see patients about 1.5 to 2 days a week. So patients being, in this case, radiology exams. So reading them, those MRIs and CTs. And so do all that stuff. And just to answer your question about dabbling in different areas, I don't necessarily see it as different domains. For me, it's just all problem solving. And again, the domain that you're taking your problem solving skills to, that could change, but that knowledge can be attained by anyone. And so for me, if I'm looking at like a problem that's rooted in digital or a device or a drug, the skill set and the process is what I'm looking at refining and what's the same for me.
Yes.
But the actual content, I'm not so attached to, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So this is very also interesting when you're talking about your career. I think so. I'll quickly mention one of the quotes that Scott Galloway talks about is balance when establishing your career. In my view, is largely a myth. Like it basically is something where you have to work through everything. And love was a willingness to take the life you built for yourself and tear it up for another person. So he's like thought about how you potentially also spend time finding the right partner and this is also fascinating. I will say the last thing is that you want to cover more ground in less time than your peers. This is like partially built on talent, but mostly strangely endurance and perseverance. And how have you been able to manage all these things with your time? You must have a crazy calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, the two things I would say is being good at delegation, knowing when to give your baby up, to trust the right
Mm,
people, like you alluded to it, the right partner. Just being really good at that and knowing that you don't have to micromanage. So there's a set of leadership skills, obviously, that you need. And the second thing, you mentioned endurance and perseverance. I'm a big believer in competitive sports. I grew up
mhm.
playing hockey and soccer, a lot of hockey, obviously being in Toronto, being Canadian, and a lot of that was getting up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. for practices to be the best, moving up those levels of skills as a youth hockey player and soccer player, and just continually refining and persevering, and basically knowing that if you're out, not doing anything, partying, whatever, on a Friday, there's another team out there that's practicing and that's supplanting you in the standings. And that was kind of the philosophy. And so just that, I think that work ethic is what you alluded to, the
That's
ability to
great.
sacrifice balance, especially when you're young, is really important. And, people have different opinions on it. But for me, it was definitely crucial, being in Boston and being able to, willing to work all night, weekends, just whatever it was.
That's incredible. You're very dedicated in the work, and also it sounds like you love it too, which means it's also doesn't feel like work at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have also wanted to ask you about this because I think you're at the forefront of not only medical technology, but innovation with AI and automating radiology work, and screening. And how is that advancing in the field that you're seeing?
It's such a big question that goes back a few years. It's so, if you asked, Jeffrey Hinton in 2016, he would say, when I was in residency, he would say you should quit residency, right? He said in
Mm,
5 years, radiology won't exist as a field because AI will have supplanted it. Obviously, radiology is more important than ever. There's a huge human workforce shortage. Um, AI is at the point where the diagnostic capabilities, and we've done studies in this, as done many others have done studies, is very good. In some cases, depending on the study and how it's constructed in the data set, it can actually surpass humans, radiologists, in reading specific scans, X-rays, MRIs, CTs. But what we've realized, and what I hope most people have realized, is that medicine and practicing medicine is a lot more than making a diagnosis.
yes.
Um, yeah, it's about not just making the diagnosis, making it in a timely manner, the workflow, creating a treatment plan with the patient that they buy into. There's just so much more beyond it. Doing the right test at the right time, not doing every test, especially in the era of value-based care. And AI tends to overestimate the test. I would say I'm bullish on AI. We published a lot on AI. But I think the timeline for AI to make significant impacts in medicine and in the workforce is a lot longer than most people are hoping for at this point.
Did you know that improving preventive care can significantly impact your health plan star ratings? Everly Health Solutions is the leader in at home testing for health plans. Their convenient, member centric approach has helped plans achieve industry leading results. In just 1 year, Everly Health Solutions helped a multi state Medicare group improve 15 of their plans by at least 1 star. That's a win for members, providers, and the plans themselves. Learn how Everly Health Solutions can elevate your health plan at everlyhealthsolutions.com.
I love that you're also mentioning, we talk a lot about this on my other podcasts and areas, especially I give talks on AI, and we talk about how you have to focus on AI augmenting the care, and it can supplement some things. It does make things streamline faster. It can point to certain things on the scans, but you still need to have the treatment plans that sometimes it's a bit of art and science.
Yeah.
Science is there, but you have to go back and forth with the patient. So you're seeing radiology continuing to be very, I would say, very useful, not only to have that background of reading images, but then will you see it kind of supporting radiologists down the line and being able to see it would one radiologist be able to see 10 instead of, or one patient per 5 minutes? How are you seeing that change?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. It's also a little bit of seeing the right patient at the right time and triaging them correctly. So I'll just give you one example. I'm an emergency radiologist. So let's say there's 10 patients with dizziness, trauma, and they all have head CTs. Now, 90% of those are going to be negative head CTs. And then the decision becomes, with all your other scans to read all the other patients, which one do you read first? And so you can
Mm,
take a look. You can go, oh, should we read the person who came in first and had their scan done first? But the ED doesn't operate that way, right? The ED is a triage center. You're designed to see the sickest people first because there's a length of turnaround problem, right? You need to treat the sickest patients first. And so one way we're testing AI, and I think a really promising tool done by numerous companies, is to preview scans like head CTs before the radiologist looks at them, and to
interesting.
just
Yeah.
eliminate the ones that are likely negative and say, these are the ones that likely have a brain bleed. You should read these first, regardless of when they came in, what the demographics, whatever, anything else is. Triage these first. That is extremely helpful. And so it's tools like that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're making the diagnosis better than a human, but they're
That's
helping you
right.
improve the quality of care and the timing of care. And so those are things I'm excited about.
That is great. So thanks for explaining that. I think that makes a ton of sense to try to manage in a way that helps support you and also kind of prioritizes
Yeah.
all of that. I
Yep.
think I'd love to pivot to some of the work that you mentioned about how you work on companies. And um, I think because a lot of people are listening here are innovators and entrepreneurs. One of the things that you have done very well is commercialization of strategy, both taking off the shelf things that are patentable and then commercializing, creating companies. What are common mistakes that inventors, that innovators do when taking medical innovation, and how should they avoid them?
I would say that the biggest one is there's just two. So the biggest one is not spending enough time validating the original need and the value proposition. And you see this in
Hmm.
companies, even they're able to raise funding off it, off teams. But the core value proposition just wasn't that good, and the market wasn't big enough to begin with.
Yes.
So, and again, that goes back to training, right? None of us are trained to, critically in the design thinking process, empathize with the end user and spend 95% of our time on figuring out the medical need. And so that's the biggest mistake I see. And we're in an environment where to get grants, you basically have to have completed projects submitted to whether it's whatever
Yeah.
granting agency, because they don't want the risk of untested problems. And so researchers are constantly to get money are constantly in the issue of having to basically have solutions and then retroactively finding problems that fulfill one grant criteria or the theme of another grant, and that's the exact wrong way to do innovation. So that's the big mistake I see. The second one is physicians and researchers. It might be a little ego driven and tough to admit for folks like myself, but it's the idea that the disease that all you need is a good idea, and that's you're golden, right? But in fact, a good idea is the minimal, right? And that team that's going to iterate, change it, test it, go back to focus groups, change the prototype, get funding, business plan. That
Yes.
process is really the art of commercialization. And a good idea, it's necessary, but it's not remotely sufficient. But if you ask a physician, a lot of them will say, early physician innovators that haven't done this will say, look, this is my idea, just take it, license it out. But
Mm.
that's not how it works.
So going back to that, because you run Mesh and it's this incredible organization. I want to hear more about it when we get a chance to. On I think what's happening in May is that you're going to be inviting some great speakers and having this great conference. Uh, Before we get into that, just quickly on these hospitals and large organizations, a lot of people feel like they're slow moving, they're bureaucracies. How do you navigate the resistance to change, sometimes introducing new operational efficiencies or technologies, or even commercializing things? And also, as a company, could you take out some things that are currently being incubated and then put it back into the hospital to use? And how do you structure that?
Yeah, no, I think most hospitals, they're very slow moving. As you just said, there are reasons for that. Obviously, it's a high stakes place. We just don't want to be testing things. I think there's two truths. One is it really depends on the leadership. And at the end of the day, if you have a leadership that is, not going to let you do things and there's not going to be a way around it, look for another institution. Luckily, MGB is not that place. And the second part is you have to be kind of willing to sell yourself and your vision to basically every single person up the management chain. Because when you're doing something new, like I'll give you an example. When we did Mesh, we didn't have a space. We didn't have any tools when we were first starting out. And we had to convince an operational executive whose job it really was to like run the radiology department operational efficiencies, to like expense us, find us a space where we can put a bunch of 3D printers and do all this stuff that wasn't in their job description, but we were able to make the case
Yes.
and sell ourselves that this was something that we needed to do. And so I think being able to, sell is a huge benefit to any physician in the hospital, outside the hospital. The second,
Sell yourself, sell your ideas, sell your
yeah,
business plan.
basically all of life,
All of
right?
them.
Is it's it can be
I think
reduced
that's
in
very
some
true.
ways. And the second part was about taking company tested products, let's say, and bringing them back into the hospital. Our strategy there is, in fact, to keep things in the hospital as long as possible from a inventor standpoint, because the red tape is a lot less if you're in the four walls of the hospital and testing it. And then when you're ready, have that full utility or whatever patent and license it out to a company. Because to come back in, while we do it all the time through sponsored research agreements, focus groups, other grants, it's a lot more difficult. And so being a nonprofit, the strategy is, get it as far along as you can, get some broad protection on the IP, send it
Hmm.
out to a company to refine, get more specific patents, and then create a portfolio. And that's the general structure we use.
That's incredible. So we should talk about Mesh and sort of what you're doing, because one thing that I think a lot of people always ask me too, as medical trainees, what should they focus on if they want to become leaders in healthcare innovation, and where do they carve their niche? Is it in academia? Is it in biotech? Is it in digital health? Is it in medical services first, and then they come back to something? What advice would you give?
I mean, my advice is be a dead horse, but it's just to focus on honing your skills in problem solving, and then pick something. Pick something where maybe you're passionate about a personal connection, maybe a family member, maybe a relative who had an issue in a specific, the medical record, there was an error or something. Pick something that's going to drive you, and then use those problem solving skills to attack and focus in on it. Recruit people into your lab, into your network, your advising board, let's say, that are skilled in that one area. And I would just say relentlessly attack it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've also done some interesting exercises in my head with ChatGPT too. You can ask it, prompt it, like, help me understand where I'm blocked, and channel whoever it is that yours your hero to help understand, and give me 5 things that are unconventional to think through. And I sometimes write letters to myself to say, in 10 years, I actually had ChatGPT write a letter for me in 10 years to myself now, on advice that ChatGPT would give me. And it was actually pretty useful. Like, what moments stood out? How do you think about time? Just time shifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
All this, I think, also comes down to some of the work-life integration and how you think about defining, like you said, your presence, how do you sell yourself? How do you sell your idea? And what's meaningful? How do you pick what you work on to make sure it's meaningful to you?
Oh, I look for things that are unsolved, and that, are a pain point, perhaps in my daily life for me specifically. A
Yes.
lot of the research is doing a shift and, even being annoyed about something that's happening, right? Ordering too many CT scans and costing the system too much, and then
Yes.
digging into that. And so I think it's a lot of personal dissatisfaction with, could be something in medicine, could be something as simple as like going to the DMV or RMV or so, like these systems all around you that aren't working at optimal efficiencies, and then seeing those and just thinking of ways that you can bring maybe your skill set in one discipline to that one. Maybe you dropped in on a comp sci class, which I do it from time to time at MIT, and then bring that knowledge to something else, to that problem. And so for me, the joy in doing this stuff and what keeps me from burning out is not just, staying in one area, but it's just looking around and seeing things that aren't working and being able to maybe optimize those. And even a small iterative innovation doesn't have to be super disruptive, doesn't have to change the game, but a small iterative innovation can make a huge impact, especially for big problems. And so
That's great.
for me, there's devices, there's digital, but it's really whatever is the most annoying, I would say, at the time for me is what I like to focus on.
That's and also not letting those annoyances get you stuck, but actually drive you to want to change it. I
There are
think
opportunities. Yeah.
there are opportunities. Seeing every challenge as an opportunity to learn, to grow. It's another book that I've been reading called Shift, Managing Your Emotions by Ethan Kross, and he talks about, and you and I have talked about this time shift where he thinks, does this is annoying today, but will it matter tomorrow or in 5 years? And so another way to think about it is, this is annoying in my job, but 5 years ago, I would have done anything to get this job.
Yep.
So how do I think about being grateful and kind of redefining where you are in your time frame, and like sort of perspective shifts?
That's really true. Yeah. You see that a lot in career too. For many, getting into even becoming a doctor, getting into medical school was like, no way. And you get in, and then, there's the residency you want to go to, and then you get in. And so like, it really is helpful, exactly what you just said, to like kind of reset yourself to where you were and just think about it for a second. I certainly don't do that enough myself. That's really good advice.
So I want to make sure we also cover MESH and what you're doing, because this great conference is coming up in May. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so as we alluded to earlier, so MESH, which stands for Medically Engineered Solutions in Healthcare, is the first incubator in hospital. I created it when I was a resident. And to the earlier point of how you work on things, I was frustrated with the fact that there was no education, no pathway for faculty to convert their ideas in their head to a piece of paper and eventually to a product. And so I decided to make that pipeline. That's really what Mesh is. There's an educational component, which we run in the hospital at MGH and Brigham, teaching faculty. About a year ago, we took that in-house internal curriculum, which is the innovation bootcamp for the hospital, whole system, and we put it in a conference, which is the May 12th to 13th conference that you're speaking at. So thank you. And we decided to make it 2 days and invite not only internal Harvard, Mass General Brigham, MIT folks, but folks from around the world, open to the public. And so put about 350 people in a room in Somerville, 2 days, hands-on boot camp where you're learning everything about how to speak the language of innovation and commercialization in healthcare. That means problem solving through live Harvard Business School case studies, learning about the fundamentals of patents on venture funding. And so boot camp, you go through it, you get a certificate. At the end, you're able to speak the language. And when you go to these conferences and you meet investors, you're able to talk to them, at the level that they want to talk at. And so that's really what the boot camp is. Following that, there's various advanced programs. We have a whole biodesign program developed to spin out companies from physician and provider ideas. And so education, biodesign, and we have a research division as well, which is kind of a separate thing. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I find this all very, very informative and also very helpful, because I think I would have loved to have that even as a trainee and medical student resident. So I appreciate you doing that. Are there things that you feel like, as we sort of wrap up, looking ahead in 10 years, disruptors that you see and things that I think even advice at the intersection of AI, bioengineering, data, because we're definitely entering in a golden age of medical innovation. So what would you, how do you think about all of this?
This could be a long question. AI, obviously, which we've talked about quite a bit, being able to critically appraise, and AI that doesn't just spit out an answer, but is explainable and explains why, is going to get more buy-in from not just physicians, but patients. And so, the advice, the thing about that is just be a physician who can work with AI, who can adapt from your earliest and be able to praise the output and realize when it's not necessarily on target. Someone who uses AI, and the quote goes, will replace a doctor who doesn't use AI. That much I absolutely believe will become standard in the near term. Long term, it's anyone's guess. The second thing I would say is genomics. We don't talk about a lot, but in this interview, but omics, the cost to sequence is going way down. And just to throw it out there, being able to do population health level genomic sequencing, and using that for preventative care can really revolutionize medicine. So a whole nother sector that we're fortunate at MGB and other institutions have world-class researchers in. I'm really excited about that. And then the last thing, just data. All these AI tools, all these vendors, the electronic medical record, interoperability, privacy, and security, while not as exciting maybe in getting the huge grants or venture funding that AI or genomics might get, is probably going to be the most important backbone of all of this, the data. And we're moving to a very data focused and data centered healthcare system. So those are the three things I would throw out.
Well, that was phenomenal. I really appreciate the time that you basically educated me on for all these things that you are doing and continue to do in this incredible way at MGB. Before we wrap up, we always ask our guests for their hot takes for 5 questions. Wanted to make sure you're ready. So the first one is, what's the best advice you want to give anyone? It could be life advice.
Just show up and be persistent. It's 99% of the battle.
True. Hardest challenge, and how did you overcome it?
Hardest challenge was probably dealing with one of my parents getting sick and balancing the desire to be, at an elite academic level, in my opinion, and also, being away from family and managing that. Definitely the biggest challenge for me.
How did you overcome that with the time of that? I'm dealing with this now, so it's very close to home.
It was for me, going back and forth from Boston to Toronto. It was a lot of visiting. It was working with an administration or administration or program that would allow you to take time to go back and forth. And I think just checking in and being there as much as possible with your parent, and meanwhile, school is really important and the boards are really important. But you don't have to get 100% on the boards, right? You can pass the boards and do well. So I think some perspective, and I will also add that leadership is, your boss or your program director, whatever you're doing, their support is really crucial during periods of family members getting sick and stuff.
I agree. Having a very good manager or a board or whoever you report to is key for, I think, not only the relationship, but the communication and prioritizing and managing time for
Yeah.
highly driven folks.
Yeah, you tend to notice that folks in very high up levels have their perspective isn't all work. They really do have a different type of perspective and motor, and that was a learning experience for me.
Yes. What's the most exciting thing for you about healthcare right now? We talked about a lot, but is there anything in particular?
Ooh, I would just say the digital revolution, the possibility for patients to own their data and have, let's say, a digital twin. All those things are really exciting, and I think you've seen a lot of those companies come out with wearable AIs. Some successful. Well, we'll see. Some successful, some not.
Yes.
But I think the collection of patient data and empowering patients is really exciting.
Great. Lastly, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say more time, really. The ability to slow down time. It moves so fast. It was just yesterday, I was just starting at moving here to go to med school, and just everything moves really fast. And so the ability to slow down time would definitely be my number one.
That's great. I really appreciate that. I think that's so true. Time we trade for things in the world, but we don't always trade things in the world for time. So I find I have to sort of sit back sometimes and push back other things so I can think and reflect and just sit and be present.
Yeah, totally agree.
So listeners, for more on Dr. Succi's work, you can follow him on LinkedIn. We'll continue to link it in the show notes. And we hope today's conversation has been not only fun, but also sparked your curiosity and inspired you to explore further. So thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep on innovating. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Did you know that improving preventive care can significantly impact your health plan star ratings? Everly Health Solutions is the leader in at-home testing for health plans. Their convenient, member-centric approach has helped plans achieve industry-leading results. In just 1 year, Everly Health Solutions helped a multi-state Medicare group improve 15 of their plans by at least 1 star. That's a win for members, providers, and the plans themselves. Learn how Everly Health Solutions can elevate your health plan at everlyhealthsolutions.com.